Tom was asking, is the United States as a whole, the body politic, can we treat that as a client maybe? What if the USA got an appointment with you and they came in?
Better have some good insurance. That's all I got to say.
Some do, and some don't, it turns out.
Turns out the United
Some
States
have
probably
none,
doesn't
maybe.
have insurance. Our nation is uninsured. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Okay, you're not going to get paid for this gig,
Yeah.
basically. But if they showed up, so can we look at the United States and the body politic in a way so that it makes sense from a personality standpoint, or maybe because people are conflicted. Individuals hold all kind of complex ideas and
It's true.
ambivalence and all kinds of things happening. So, but can we diagnose the USA? I guess that's part of my question that I heard from my good friend.
Well, it's interesting
Dr.
because
Hackett over here.
this idea goes all the way back to Freud. He has an essay called Group Psychology, which I think he wrote pretty early on in his career, 1910, 20, I don't know, something like that. And he sort of talked about how to think about a nation state as a body politic, and to think about it that way.
Okay.
And to think about groups in that sense and how they operate, and that a group can be well or unwell, right? And then my main man, Wilfred Bion, later on sort of was one of the pioneers of group therapy. And he thought about that. He thought about that groups can have very specific forms of pathology. So there's a precedent for that.
Okay.
You know?
Well, I wasn't really sure if it makes sense to, because I have a problem with sort of the groupthink. This is kind of the thing that we try to huddle everybody into one something that we can identify, and we put all these complex ideas into some simple form, and it doesn't really represent us as an individual, but also as a nation. So I don't know. What's the therapeutic approach for the USA coming into therapy?
Well, so maybe the first step is, and maybe we need to, because in therapy, there has to be some level of assessment and diagnosis before you proceed. You got to know what you're dealing with before you generate a your treatment plan.
Right.
So we probably have to step back and think about that. So like, and this is going to be tough. I think you guys tell me what you think, because it can be really difficult if you're within a context, a cultural context, point in time, to be able to look at it outside of yourself.
All right.
Right. So we are participants.
That's almost a conflict of interest, because we're
in the middle of it.
USA.
And though this doesn't often happen, I am the youngest person in the room. That doesn't often happen, by the way. I'm at an age where literally everybody's 25. So
exactly.
So that sounds creepy. That's not how I'm gonna. It just has to do with my profession.
I have no idea what he's talking
really,
about. Okay, go ahead.
I want to edit that out, but I think that so we may have grown up in different cultural contexts, and we may see this differently. We were joking before about this idea that the boomers, sees things certainly different, right?
Oh yeah, and that's the other problem I think I have, is that we have grouped people together, and then we make a decision, or we look at them in a certain way, but that's really not reality. I mean, that's what we've done is we've grouped people to make it easier for us to think about it and work with it.
Well, it's good for an individual, right, to be reflective and to maybe hold some conflicting thoughts and try to resolve those into some kind of direction.
Oh, absolutely.
So maybe I'm off base saying that the apparent chaos in the U.S. and globally really is based on really some kind of emotional illness in the body politic. Maybe my thought was mistaken in the sense that maybe this is just part of an evolutionary procce.
Yeah, it's like developmental. We're going through adolescence or childhood and then young adult, et cetera.
Yeah, when the whole 60s thing, it seemed very chaotic, and it seemed like camps opposed, and then it kind of settled out over the next few years, and boomers who were so against the so-called greatest generation, then they kind of sold out and started making money and went in a whole new direction. So I just wonder, at the same time, things just seem to be spinning, in a direction where I really don't recognize where I am anymore.
Well, and in a way, we sort of lost ourselves, like human beings do. Individuals come upon situations where it affects you personally. Maybe it's your family. Maybe it's a larger context, but you have to manage it somehow, and you have to realize that this is happening and make those decisions. And can we do that as a collective group? That's where I get lost a little bit.
That's why when I said the guys, y'all are the guys, I said the guys were talking about chaos, particularly in the United States, but it appears it's global, So I started thinking, and remember, I sent a disclaimer that said I'm a layman, so I really don't know what I'm talking about, but I thought, golly, if you have chaos, then doesn't that stem from some kind of internal dysfunction?
A sickness, an illness.
Well, I didn't want to say that because I'm not a real therapist like you guys. So, but yeah, just some kind of thing you need to work out. And how do we work it out? And I thought, well, the guys are therapists. Maybe they can
they would know.
prescribe for them.
Yeah, let's ask the therapist over there.
So let's think about this thing then, because one thing you said struck me is that. And I can't remember the guy's name who wrote the Angels of Our Better Nature. He's I think he's at Harvard. He's a philosopher or sociologist, but he says that there is this upward trend for things to get better, and they have continued to get better. And if you wanted to be alive at any point in the history of mankind, now is the time, and it just gets better. And he points to the 60s because there's some research to suggest that was the last time we had a rise in violence. There was a like it's been steadily decreasing. Suddenly it goes up just a little bit there, and so part of the reason I bring that up is I think that it is in the cultural narratives need us to be afraid and to see things as chaos, and is it right? And I think so. If we're going to diagnose this, like, and I'm wearing a commie lefty shirt, and so I'm on the left. I like to think I'm on the true left, but that's a different thing. The left always eats its own. It's always on the left side of the equation. Nobody gets along. But so I want to be like, for instance, there's so much. How much of my distrust and dislike for Trump is based on reasoned experience and data I've collected? How much is that filtered through these cultural institutions that need me to feel that so that I can continue to feed them financially or otherwise? So I don't know. I think my assessment, because right now, if we were going to, again, why we'd say this, if we were going to give a diagnosis, everybody's saying that we're taking a fascist turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And if that's true, then that could be our diagnosis. That right now there is a division based on a fascist turn, and there's some indication from Adorno and those guys who studied fascism right after World War II. I think it was right before, right after, I can't remember. I think it was right after. And they were saying that there's certain economic conditions and a general instability that generates a group need for a leader to tell them what to do.
Right.
They need certainty, right?
Yeah,
and if we go back to like figures like Jordan Peterson and folks like those, they would sort of point to Nietzsche and say that part of the uncertainty comes from the fact that we no longer have a religion with a capital R. We've moved to a phase where we don't the fixed horizons we used to operate under have changed.
That's interesting,
right?
Yeah.
And so. And there's a famous quote from Nietzsche where he said, God is dead. And it's based on this little aphoristic story he tells about a madman walks into a marketplace and keeps saying, God is dead, and we've killed him. And they're just laughing at him, thinking it's funny. And he's saying, no, the horizons have shifted and changed. And he's saying, I'm telling you, something bad's about to happen. And so maybe we're seeing economic, spiritual, intellectual. I mean, one of the things that I've thought about at some point we might could talk about too is there's now there seems to be, again, you got to be able to filter it through these cultural filters. Is it really true? But there seems to be a real fight, a cultural distrust of expertise.
Yes.
Right? There's an attack on universities. There's an attack on expertise. There's this notion that, some guy who literally doesn't really know much can do a YouTube video that seed oils are, horrible for you and And the research literally
Right,
doesn't show
right.
that. I mean, it's not, but that right now it's like a given. Like suddenly, and
Right,
you can
right,
you can
yeah.
trace that back literally to someone who just decided that was true. And and part of what the seed oil thing, and again, I'm sure I'm missing points, but part of what generated distrust there is it's often used in processed food because it's easy because processed food require large masses of things that are easily quantified and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
So it's there, but it doesn't mean that it's the reason why the thing is bad. It's like saying salt is by itself inherently bad. A lot of it is, obviously, but if that makes any sense. I'm getting off topic. But my point
No,
is,
that's good. We're
is
following.
that
I
at
think.
every level, if we're going to diagnose this, there could be some level of instability. And so at this point, we need certainty, and that's what happens with a fascist turn, right?
Right.
Maybe.
Right. Well, it fits with what I know about child development too, because the child therapists and the writers in that field talk about stability being one of the most important ingredients of good child development and growing, because you have to wake up every
You should
morning
have
with
talked to my
something
mom.
similar. Yeah, that's right. we got that we won't solve that one anytime soon. But what I was saying is that need for that consistency, and you wake up every morning and the same things are around you in that room. Where as a child, you need that. And now I'm wondering if adults, and maybe the USA as a persona, maybe need that stability too. And that we all need it. I'm not sure we're getting it.
Well, and again, I have to preface everything by coming from, it doesn't seem to me that our current president is providing stability. Now, maybe I'm wrong. And
I
just,
don't think
and
you're going to have too
but-
many
but it seems-
people disagree.
seems kind of
but maybe-
wacky right now at every turn, economically and whatnot, and
Yeah, and I'm going to take off on that just a little bit. So I was reading early this morning the idea of dementia, that as you get older and dementia begins to happen
It's a
for
natural
some
thing.
people, what they do is it narrows down their thinking, so that this idea of this world full of ideas suddenly becomes very compacted, and it's the last person that they talk to, or the last person to influence you, and that's the decision process there. So that's kind of scary when you're narrowing your field of view and at the same time making the most important decisions.
Yeah, I hate it when
in a
that
way.
happens to me. I start to. Last thing you said, Mike, what was that? I'm going
Yeah,
to
that's it.
act
Here we
on
go.
that. Yeah.
It may not go for those people around the table, but
well, I mean, part of what happens with intelligence as you get older, it becomes less fluid and more crystallized.
right.
And that's actually a benefit to a greater degree, because you now have these heuristic maps that allow you to sort through information very quickly, and you can make reasoned judgments that are often intuitive, and that's a good thing.
Right.
There's a point at which it calcifies, and it becomes, and if an individual has always been fairly rigid in thinking, and again, I have,
that's quite all right.
it would appear as if, based on information that my relationship with our current president goes all the way back. I remember as a kid, him on Saturday Night Live, or he was something, and that's back when he was on the left. People forget that Trump,
Right.
and Trump probably is far more mercurial, at least, than he is conservative in social sense. But
Right.
I just remember he was the example of what the kind of man I didn't want to be. Like, I remember,
Right.
just feeling this, and I was actually grateful. I was like, I need some parameters on where that, and my picture of him was just some sort of rapacious and superficial, and
Right.
someone who didn't necessarily cultivate depth, but was flash. I remember the golden
Wait,
toilet.
you say yes, golden toilets, but you're saying that you got that idea and concept and started thinking about it early on.
Well, I
almost
mean,
the first.
I think I was 12 years old when my father died. He literally died right in front of me.
Oh.
And so, I was impressionable. I was smart enough, I think, and aware enough at that point to know that I needed some sort of guidance, and it was no longer there, which then the family got thrown into chaos. So my experience of Trump sort of came in that moment in time when I was like, and I probably projected my own, image of my dad onto him. My dad was the opposite of that. He was, that's not nothing like him. And, so yeah, I'm not sure what this has to do with the body politic.
I think I was hearing that. And I think the influence of that and the instability comes from the constant chaos. If you can't have those patterns that you talked about as you developed over time, you don't have that roadmap to sort of help you make that decision if everything is new and in chaos and coming up all the time very fast. So you have no anchor to connect with in helping you make those decisions. So you just make decisions on a whim. Right?
Well,
I mean, that's where it leads to.
It could, in his case, let's assume we all lose cognitive capacity. That's a fact. We just, and there is little d dementia occurs, and I think right now he's the oldest individual to be in the office. I think he's now older than Biden was when he left. Maybe I'm wrong, but I thought that was the case. It may not be.
Getting there.
But, so, and again, I can only offer my own opinion based on my own experience.
Sure.
His leadership style always was strikingly, I'm just sorry, bad, horrible.
Well,
Just,
I know one of the people sitting at this table is an expert in leadership. So what I would say is that
he's also very diplomatic because he's not going to put his 2 cents on this.
He's not.
Well, yeah, sure I will. But, what.
I didn't even ask the question. What happened there?
My point about the going back to the body politic is it seems we haven't been very well served for a while, and the point about aging leaders who seem to be tied to models from yesterday or models they created way back when and that may not be applicable now. See, that cuts across the grain. I mean, it's on the side of both parties. I often wonder about the two-party system too. That's a whole different question.
That is a different kind of question, an important question too. We have to come back.
But getting back to that, so you have us lurching from the body politic. Well, I want to go this way, and then you go that way, and then, no, I don't like that way. Now I want to go this way. We haven't been that well served in terms of dealing with the global chaos, but at the same time, we haven't gravitated toward any kind of middle ground. So you have middle ground kind of moderate candidates in both parties. Well, they don't seem to resonate. The candidates I liked that were Democrats and the candidates I liked that were Republicans, they it was like, woo, wah, wah. And then we're excited about the extremes of both parties. And that's on the public, isn't it? Because the public, actually, we vote. And
right.
I
don't have any answers to that, but I have some speculation. So
okay.
I'll speculate here. If
I want to hear it.
Well, the idea is that the onset of communication, the change in communication through the internet and through our phones and the technology rise, put everybody's voice out there very quickly. In the past, we had the 3 channels. Even going way back, we had just a few channels to watch on TV, and we got that influence that way. So I think influence is the key word. In other words, you now influence constantly to things to buy. You looked at the ad, you get 4 more ads later on about the same thing. I mean, it's coming at you very fast. So we used to have to sit back, had time to kind of think about this candidate or where they're going, what their policies are. Now it's just sound bites that are blasted, and everybody reacts. It's all influence and reaction. And I think the human being, the USA human being, is is confused, very confused.
And we're reading lots of AI generated material too.
Oh, that's gonna make it worse. We're gonna see this AI thing. We've got to talk about this more.
That will be interesting. You got me really fascinated by it. So now I'm reading up on Chat GPT and different kinds of AI formats. But you type in some kind of prompt, create an algorithm, and then it just generates content.
Right.
And then somebody else types in their prompt, and all that's out there, and eventually you have a feed come up, and it tells you, hey, Tom, these are the things you're interested in. A lot of times I'm not interested in it, but the algorithm picks it up somehow or another. Mostly it's about shopping for guitars, but not always. And then, I get these weird things, and I go, oh, man, that's sort of strange. And where did that come from?
Well, it makes my point, and I think that same ad mentality, we want to sell you something, so now you said you liked this or you watched it for a couple of seconds, now we're going to bombard you with these ads. I think the same thing is happening in the body politic. You got the main players that you want to kind of track and see what they're doing. You got two big, everybody's like, so this idea that, I'm going to go off on a tangent real quick. Your idea that the USA is a human being coming in for therapy. First of all, I'd love to see it. I don't think it's going to happen. We're not coming. We're not coming in. You have to drag us in or a court order.
May require ECT. May need to be
I would think.
Or some trepanning. Yeah, some trepanning. I'm not sure.
Well, I just wanted to say that I think we're there in this body politic as a therapist client. And that we've been so influenced, there's not enough time for you to read in depth, to think in depth. The book by I'm sorry, blocking his name, but called The Shallows, that the technology has moved us to just skimming through things very quickly and not reading at depth and knowing the issues at depth. And we're on a very superficial kind of platform here, it seems like. And I think, and this is just, again, my speculation, that this is going to be even more chaotic. If we take the United States, make that into a person that comes into therapy, we have to do that as well for all the other countries. So we've got a crew of line of people.
But here's the thing. We are, technically, even though by many markers we're not, we're technically still the global power. So culturally, I think that if we're like in the current, we're often blamed on the current sort of spread of, quote, fascism, because we sort of set the standard and pace for things. So
and I don't know if we define fascism from our point of view, but it sounds to me like a dictator telling you what to do and you lose your rights. I don't know.
It's first off, it's a slippery word to define to begin with, because you already make political assumptions. And so how you define it, sort of in some ways, it becomes a cudgel. So so you have to be careful.
That's right. It's sort of loaded because of the Hitler context and Mussolini and all that.
Yeah. So
right.
It's not. But I think that if you look at the research around that as a concept, typically there is some level of authoritarianism. Right. And so that is sort of the central thing. And so, and again, I'm trying to be neutral enough not to say, is that a word that applies to, say, Trump or to some current political leaders? I have my opinion, but if I'm acting as a clinician, part of when someone comes into my office, my own opinion, my biases have to be curbed. I have to be, I have to have binocular vision. I've got to be able to see as clearly as I can the person in front of me, but also be aware in the ways like, if someone comes in and starts talking to me and they have very different political views, but I'm supposed to care for them, I'm supposed to help them, I have to find a way to be able to step away, or if whatever the case may be. I had someone this week or last week give me an example where there was some element of animal cruelty in their story. And, I could really feel myself become upset. And so the goal is, how do you find a way to be present, both participant, but observer enough to be able to curb your own feelings? Because this person is here and they need my help. I need to be able to do that. So we probably have to, that's why I'm trying to remain neutral to this.
Right.
But let's assume, because, you sort of brought this up earlier. If we go back to Freud, there was a famous exchange of letters between Freud and Einstein, and he wrote a letter to Freud saying, "Why war?" And ultimately, Freud's response was, "Why peace?" You know,
Wow.
like
Okay.
Freud basically said, "Look at the history of the world."
Hey, yeah. Look who you're dealing with here, pal.
Yeah.
That's
And
It's us.
Freud was a pretty pessimistic guy, but at the time he was slowly dying of cancer of the jaw, so probably that didn't help. But his point was, and it's sort of what you were touching on, this may be existential and it may be necessary. That if and there are philosophers like the guy I talk about a lot, Zizek, who talks about this, pulling from Hegel and Lacan, that conflict is inherent even at the level of the smallest particles. That there is, and that is how something gets in. That is how change happens. So the only point of non-conflict, and Freud's famous statement is the only anxiety-free state is death, because that's when it stops. And so even the most convoluted and horrible historical act can be seen as some form of growing pain. That comes in the philosopher Hegel, that the world spirit is always moving and it's continually trying to refine itself, and there's some sort of ultimate potentially goal, or someone would interpret what he said as actually the goal is what you said earlier, ambivalence. So it's not that we can reconcile the left and the right, but they are inherently necessary for the body politic.
It's a dialectic.
Right.
Yeah.
And there are two ways to think about that. Some people interpret a dialectic as a synthesis, but a lot of contemporary philosophers say no. It is the ability to hold things in tension. And, I've already identified...
Wow, yeah.
I like it. I like that phrase.
And so I've already identified myself as someone on the left. So I have some, like you were talking about voting. And, I'm... In my mind, because I'm on the left, I've yet to see someone who truly represents my left-wing values in office. Like, I don't,
Right.
and there's no one on the political spectrum right now that really does that. I don't, but I'm aware that that's also comes from the way I'm looking at things. And but I'm also aware, especially reading things like, there's a famous thing by Zizek. He said that only a conservative president can accomplish left-wing agendas.
Okay.
And he said, partly because, it's much more possible to get the right to agree and vote accordingly.
Yes.
But also because
Lockstep.
it's only there's also something inherent about the way the whole universe works, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Like, for instance, there were more deportations under Biden. They continue. There are, even though right now there's this combing across to be able to somehow top Biden's, this is how I've been reading the data. I may be wrong. But part of the reason why ICE is going everywhere because they're trying to meet a quota to somehow show that they're better at deportation than Biden. But no one would think about that. They would think about open borders and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that's right. That's the influence
and the
side
left,
of it, yeah.
And the left would say, Trump's horrible because he's deporting people. So there's, wait a minute, that's a bit of data.
What the other guy did.
Yeah, it's not, But the point would be, if it is existential, and then our goal is, how do we generate the necessary ambivalence for our current growing pains to give birth to the thing that needs to be grown? And I'll shut up here in a second.
All right.
But if you look at what happened with the election, part of the reason why it swung in the place it did, I think for cultural reasons. I think there was some rapid cultural movement around trans rights and about things like that, abortion. That's been fermenting for a long time. And so there was a correction in the opposite direction. Like, they just canceled the suicide line, or they're canceling the suicide line for gay and lesbian and transgender folks.
Right.
And on the surface, that seems horribly cruel. But they're justifying it by saying, well, that's because, that was special. That was a special category that we were, and we were assisting people to become gay and trans because we had somehow were, saying it's okay. Whatever. There's the conflict around that. So my thought would be, if there's some sort of growing pain here, and if the guy's name's Steven Pinker, he would say,
yeah, of course,
that's the guy. He would say, okay, things are still better than they've ever been, but something's trying to happen. And what is that? And if this were my patient, I would say, okay,
there we go.
How do I find a way to help this person to be able to generate the necessary tension to get the wisdom from their current suffering?
Wow, yeah.
And how do they move forward? And that might be the place to start. What is it that's being born here? What is, and does it connect with the chat? Because, we talked about it here before. Like, I'm aware when I'm talking with my son, he has a different mind than I do because he's a digital native. He will not stand more than 10 seconds. We're watching reels that are only 30 seconds long, and he will not finish the reel. And then I'll say, in my mind, you just missed it. He said, I didn't miss it.
The joke's coming up.
But he said, no, I already know what it's going to be. And then he literally knew it. He only had 10 seconds to be able to figure this whole thing out and move on. His mind works differently than mine.
And that goes to what my wife says about that generation is an evolved state beyond where we are.
Wow.
If that's your son, then just think of where boomers are in their as in relation to their progeny and the other generations coming. I mean, it's really a big change.
I had that somebody posted a meme and it said, I just bought this $600 video card and it's working wonderfully. And then down below, and then it shows the back of the computer and it says, when is somebody going to tell him? And I was like, what does this mean? So I looked at it and I showed it to my son. He said, oh, he doesn't have it plugged into the card. He's actually using the and again, you guys know
the motherboard, yeah.
Yeah, he's using the winner. So, and I was like, but I wouldn't I
wouldn't even get the reference.
But it literally took him like instantly. He's like, okay. Oh, that's what that is. So when you talk about that, that is part of what we're dealing with. We have Gutenberg minds, and that's actually a good thing. Our goal is to do our thing and get the hell off stage. Is that not right? I mean, that's what we're supposed to do.
Well, I think that is the natural course of things.
That's right,
whether we want to go or not.
Well, but here's the thing. It doesn't mean you got to die. It means that you no longer have to be center. You can be on the side of the stage. You can occasionally step in the center.
That's right.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But you're no longer the center.
Well, and to your point, in politics that hadn't happened. The
No.
leadership across the board, both parties, has been aging folks, boomers and pre-boomers, and folks who just kind of just hang on and are operating from a mindset that really was developed in the 60s.
Sometimes in the 50s.
Sometimes in the 50s. And when I actually look at my grandchildren and where they are, and I have two different generations of grandchildren. We got the guy who's 18, we got the kid who's 5, right? Mm-hmm. So they aren't even on the same page as far as what your point is exactly right. They do not think the same. They don't process the same. In a lot of ways, they process faster. Now, some of that's a function of youth, and I think some of that is the function of environment where they've just grown up with things we didn't grow up with. I'm having to embrace it mindfully so that I can just hang in, right? Yeah.
Well, like for instance, I was supervising an intern. I think this intern's in their 20s, and I was talking about music. And I was like, I'm going to listen to an album. The idea of me sitting down and listening to an album blows their minds.
Wow.
Because remember, back in the day, I mean, I'm old enough to where you had an album, and it was you took it out of the sleeve, and you sat it down, and you had to listen because you had to turn it back over. And that was, you engaged in this space for as long as that was.
That's right.
And that is completely alien.
Yeah, tried to look at what the unity of the album was, and then you had concept albums and so on. And that goes to performance music, too. You've got several movements. Well, you listen to all the movements to get the intent of the composer. Man.
All right, I just think that makes my point earlier.
That
I appreciate you guys
getting
on my side on the train here with this idea.
Oh, we're riffing off you, Mike.
So this body politic that came in for therapy, I mean, what's the prognosis? Have you set up a treatment plan? Do you know how you're going to approach this USA person that's just signed on? And by the way, some have great insurance.
They do.
They will pay.
I'm gonna throw my hand on the table. I know nothing about cards, so that's a
no
reference.
Cards. Okay.
And when anybody comes into my office, I always try to find the health, even in the horrible symptoms. There have been more than once someone who's come in my office who's been suicidal, and I on some level I don't say this directly to them, but it's good. I'm glad you're suicidal, because this is something is needed to change for a long time, and I think something's been knocking at your door, and now it's screaming.
Uh-huh.
And
Wow, we're
some
getting ready.
folks who are suicidal have been dead so long they don't know it. And we're going to have to do a little Lazarus work here because they just have, So if somebody comes into my office like this, my first stop is, I don't want to say you're sick, it's horrible, it's wrong, everything's bad, whatever. That's not the place to start. The place to start would be say if the body politic, something is being worked out, something is being born. If based on the data we've generated today, if we had to think about that, maybe it is, and it's hard for me, and this is where my bias comes in, because part of the reason I'm drawn to the left is even though I think I live my life to some degree with a level of individualism that's pretty sick. I think
Sick in a good way?
I don't know.
Okay, I don't know. We got to clarify the word sick now.
Yeah, I've always been the sort of person, if everybody was doing one thing, I would never do it. Like during COVID, when everybody was buying toilet paper, I'm like, I am not going to do what anybody else is doing. Just not going to do that. I don't care what it is. But
And you turned out to be a therapist helping others. Okay, I don't understand that.
There was some recent research that showed vegetarians and vegans, as opposed to being the personality characteristic that they're most likely to exhibit, it's not empathy. You think, well, but it's power.
Power? These vegan power people?
Because part of their...
Yeah, control. Yeah, it makes sense.
And they generate a against the grain character structure, so they're often like, screw you, but my point in all this would be, okay, so part of the reason why I think that from one thing I like from the left is the idea that we're all in this together, and that even the least of us deserves a place at the table. So how do we create a place at the table that everybody has a chance to speak? I know all voices aren't equal, but that's the goal. If I had to solidify my political thoughts in one sentence, that's it. And that involves also my conservative brothers and sisters. They have a place at the table because fallibilism, if you practice it, would say, I can't pretend like I know. They may be right. I mean, all that's going on right now that's wacky, maybe it's right. I don't know.
See,
we can't get to that point.
But that is such an open-minded approach. And having worked with you in so many situations, a lot of them kind of tense, where we had serious work to do with serious problems, I was always amazed at how you could detach your own point of view and try to draw everybody in. And that makes sense to say, hey, that's a real self-aware thing. Maybe I'm not right. I mean, I feel right. I think the approach I'm taking is right. But there was an old saying, if you're right 60% of the time, you become a multi-gazillionaire because you can just play the market.
Yeah.
But the idea was that, none of us really is. So maybe we need to be able to listen to other perspectives.
Okay. I'm sorry, but I'm going to interrupt you guys. So this is
he's not for that at all.
Yeah. What's he going to say next? All right. So what I take from that is a high order, high level appreciation of the human condition and trying to live the best life you can. Folks are not there. The USA patient that just came in our door, they're not there. They can't get to that insight level where you're there. You're going to have to help them, Mr. Therapist, to get to a point where they even consider that their position might have some flaws or might be wrong.
Well, I mean, part of what happens in therapy is you create a space for the conflict inside of you to have a chance to speak equally. Right?
Okay.
So if someone comes in and they tell me, that I'm here because my husband's driving me crazy, he's an idiot, he's always doing this, always that.
Yeah.
Well, we're already in trouble because if he's that consistent, he's a miracle. I mean, right? If you're always something, I mean, that's like call again. It's because 60% is maybe the best you can hope for.
Right.
So even if you're the most suckiest, horrible person on the planet, a broken clock is right twice a day, right?
That's right.
So there's So the first stop is, okay, we got to find a way to be able to hear, what you're feeling and get some idea of what your husband might be feeling, because that's the only way to be able to make the necessary decision. But you have to honor the fact that, and we call it the paranoid schizoid position in my theoretical model, but splitting. Splitting is necessary. You have to stumble toward grace. So folks often have to start.
Somebody write that one down, please. I
That's
just love
heavy,
that.
bro.
Those are the words
Yeah.
are right there. That's a song title. I don't know where it's going.
Sounds
but
like
I
a
wanna hear
U2
that.
U2
I
song.
like that a lot.
But in part of the necessary stumble is you may have to start with misperceiving and seeing everything in shades of either pure black and pure white. That's probably where you have to start. And if that's where you're at, you're going to have to start there anyway. You can't pretend like you can't start there.
Mm-hmm.
But most of us have to, and that's why there's an oscillation. It's a tension between seeing people in black and white and seeing shades of gray. And that if we're lucky, that can generate an upwardly spiraling helix, right? So there is this chance for us to be able to know more and more and more and incorporate more of ourselves into ourselves until we have a level of complexity that isn't damning, that doesn't shut you down, but a complexity that allows for wisdom, the ability to see more things, right?
Yes.
And so my thought would be the first step is if with the body politic, and this is where I get a little paranoid, I do think that, and on the left, I'm not anti-capitalist. Marx himself said capitalism is the greatest invention we ever invented. He said it's nothing, and it's managed to do away with feudalism. The problem is, if it keeps moving the way it is, we're screwed.
Yeah.
That's what he said. Now, he also was being opportunistic and said, well, you know what's going to dissolve everything? Religion is going to melt into air. And we're going to come in a place where, and that's when we can make the real change we need to make, right? Now, a lot of folks took that and did some bad things with it. I'm not saying, but his idea was, listen, man, we got to. There's a famous statement by him. He said, philosophers up till this now just described retroactively history or what's going on. I want to prescribe and I want to change,
Right.
And that's dangerous. Always is. Always is.
Right.
So the idea would be then. I'm not sure what my idea was. I may have gotten lost there, but
That's all right.
but
To get to the point where you're considering the possibility there may be other views and other ways to look at something.
If our goal would be, and I think
I'm
there's
glad we're talking about goals.
goals.
Yeah, go to goals.
Go to goals.
Go to goals.
Because I think I think capitalism also makes us sick. Because
I mean, we've got so many examples of this now. I'll get back to it.
Well,
Go ahead.
it's like you mentioned before. Like, remember when because I'm old enough to remember Walter Cronkite.
That's right.
I'm remembering when, and if you'll remember,
And that's the way it
was
is.
news was delivered very dryly. You had to literally make your own assumptions. There might be an opinion piece that would come on later where somebody
That's
would
right.
rant and rave for 5 minutes.
That's
Oh
right.
my God! Now it is all opinion.
Right. That's
And
right.
it was literally like, okay, this is what happened. This is what we know. And you can still get traces of that. I think there's still elements of, NPR that I think tries to be neutral in some form or fashion. What happens now is it's like an episode of Crossfire. Remember Crossfire?
Yes.
Yeah.
You get two extreme opinions
That's
and have
right.
them duke it out instead of two people who have different opinions and they can talk about their view and then you can generate that very tension. So I don't know how to get past that because it is so profitable and
Well,
I don't. I mean, how?
no, I know. It really is a sort of struggle. But I watched that show. That was
Crossfire.
a Sunday. Crossfire was a Sunday,
Yeah.
12:30, something after church ceremony. But what they would do is he would ask. I've forgotten the guy's name. I'm sorry, but anyway, he would ask the moderator ask the question, and the person would give their opinion, and then he would say wrong, and kind of straighten them out. But what happened in that show was that they were able to voice those different opinions. It sounded like this guy won the contest or something in the conversation, but it was at least it exposed some different ideas. When you're blocked off about that, it's all opinion. You agree with my opinion?
I mean,
or
like
not?
for instance, my conservative brothers and sisters, if they said, "Look, I know we want to do big things, want to help everybody, but you can't run. You still got to have a budget. You can't. You should run the government the way you run your household. You want to be able to help as many people as you can. True, but we also got to make sure that we don't sink the ship.
Yeah, we pay the light
And
bill.
if I started there, I'm like, I really can't argue with that.
The problem is, again, going back to the U.S., is since Bill Clinton,
Nobody's conservative.
we haven't had and
That
you know
is
you
a
think
problem, isn't it?
you think of Clinton as being sort of a progressive liberal type guy,
But he balanced the budget.
But the last fiscal and he did it in along with Newt Gingrich. That's astonishing when you think about that. What that took to bring those two sides together to accomplish that, but you're not seeing that kind of thing.
No, we don't even have an attempt at people coming together and letting the other one get their opinion out. We cut them off, and so that's a paradigm we're in now. So you can't say anything without somebody hitting you very quickly, and they may have a larger influence base.
Yeah.
They may have millions of people on Instagram
That's right.
or Facebook and so forth, and it gets elevated to the point where, we don't know what to believe. So the body politic coming in for therapy is so confused.
But it's trying to
Can you
think
help
some
me?
difficult things about body politic. Because let's take something that's much more controversial. Let's talk about trans rights.
Okay, go.
Because there are people within the body politic that think transgenderism is wrong,
Right.
that it's an illness. They have to have a place at the table. But they also have to have a place at the table with trans folks. And so the goal is, how do we generate the necessary tension? How do we create, and we can start with something basic that I think that anybody would agree with, that everybody should have the right to live in dignity. They should have a chance to be okay with them.
Everyone.
And
Wow.
I think we could agree
Yeah.
on that, right?
Yeah.
I think every fundamental Christian that I know would say, from their perspective, my very religion says I need to treat you with dignity.
That's
Yes.
right.
And if you are not,
atheists do too.
right? Yeah. So all along that should be a thing.
Yep.
And then we have to apply that same, because there's what the tension comes from, because our Christian folks, brothers and sisters, are feeling that they're not being respected because suddenly they're having to buy into or agree to. Or
I would just say tolerate.
Tolerate.
I mean, I don't think there would have to be anything special.
Well,
just
but we have
acknowledge
to
it.
define what toleration means, and so the conversation could be, how do we? And there is some point where there could be consensus, and so, but that requires, though, and this is what happens in therapy. You have to have those different conflicting sides have a chance to speak. You can only tame it if you can name it, right?
Yes.
So it has to be spoken, and you can only have a tension in dialect if you have two things to generate the tension, and that's where I think it would start. And I say this again as someone I am partisan in so many ways. And I say that simply because
you probably said it enough so that we got it.
But you are.
I don't know if you have to. No, I'm just trying.
You
to,
have your. You certainly have a perspective and a political opinion,
And makes
but
it
you are-
known.
But you are also and make it known. But that's not a bad thing.
No.
You are also one of the most open-minded people and accepting and caring people I know. So, both those things are happening. When you talk about this whole idea of the body politic, maybe what we need is a therapist as president to get up there and start this national discussion.
Whoa, wouldn't that be nice?
To say, hey, let's throw it on the table. Where are you guys coming from?
and here's the thing. If Zizek is right, even though I am not a fan, Trump is in a unique position to do that in a way no one else ever could.
Oh, he could do it.
If he were able to do that, if he were able to say, and if you'll remember when he ran the first time, he really embraced. We were talking about trans rights before. He embraced sexual diversity. I think he learned early on that his base did not like that, and so that shifted him in some
His
point.
trending is whatever's in the moment, right?
I also think that that he received some injury from the left around that as well. So I think that whatever, but he would be in a position to say, look, let's start with this idea. He could do that.
It's Nixon going to China. That kind of idea.
There's a
Yeah, I
that's
just
a
don't.
beautiful example. Yeah.
I like it, but I therapy takes place in a context, right? So if I come to therapy with you, I come into your office. I'm suddenly in in this environment where, hey, a lot of people get help here. This guy's going to try to help me. I'm going to be open to this experience, and now I'm in the context. We're not in the context at all. What you got is press conferences and people blaming and doing this, pointing the finger at everyone else, fake news, da-da-da. There's no context for that original thought. Even if the president wanted to do it, I don't know if he's got it in his ability to do it, but if he wanted to, I'm not sure what would be the context for this to. It doesn't seem press conferences are doing it.
Well, so
And Tom had something to say. He was
sorry,
looking at me.
I was just going to say it's politics as professional wrestling, right?
Yeah.
In other words,
that's this guy over
it's-
here said that. A couple of days
I
ago.
mean, yeah. So you have this whatever makes the greatest sound bite and gets the most clicks at any given moment, and both sides are doing it. But there's got to be someone out there who has the level of self-awareness and the sense of responsibility to say this can't continue. Although, going back to what I said now an hour ago, golly, maybe this has just got to happen to be like the alcoholic who hits the bottom and decides to go to AA, right?
Well, yeah, that's the T-shirt. War is coming.
Well, I don't want to go to the bottom. I don't want my
It's interesting.
grandkids to go there.
But it's interesting because the T-shirt says "War is coming, don't give up, hang on," and tear it down, and then it says "love." That's the last thing.
Okay, we finally got to love. We had to kill everything before this, and that's war, though, right? I mean, that's where we had our big comeback, World War II, right? The guys went over. We straightened some things out over there, Europe and Asia.
Made a lot of money building
Pacific,
tanks.
we built bombs, and we built all kinds of stuff. But also then the guys came home, and in the 50s and the late 40s, early 50s, built all these houses. Economy started kind of moving up. Do we need that refresh?
Well,
Tom, I mean, is that what's coming?
The problem is that we have the capability now to make that an existential catastrophe to where there won't be anybody left but cockroaches.
We'll get over this war and we'll be
to
back
recover,
now.
and maybe that I guess a lot of my thought is formed by what I did for a living, the fact that I was a parent, and the fact that I'm now a grandparent. I tend to focus almost maybe to a fault on what's good for kids, what's good for my students, what's good for my children, what's good. Now I look at these grandchildren and they're so beautiful, and then I go, well, wow, what are they going to be faced with? But maybe the optimist in me says they're up to it. They're going to fix it.
Yeah.
We
I
couldn't
like that.
fix it, but they're going to fix it.
Hey, these young guys coming up, they can do it.
They can do it,
Yeah.
maybe.
Well, so maybe then, if we go back to this idea of the body politic, then, I mean, part of what happens in therapy is, and this is part of the reason why, sort of keep saying I'm come from the left,
Yeah, that's right.
is that I think on some level we have to have an understanding of who we are and what we're about. So it was very important for me to be able to articulate my positions, political and otherwise, because otherwise I don't know how to orient myself. Right? Like I need to, but not orient myself in a way that spits something out, but I can begin the dialogue. Like, does that make sense? Like there has to be, you have to have some grounding. And that's why, there are conservative authors and philosophers that I find, I disagree with them. They help me to become better myself, and I think they would be really happy with that. If they're doing their job, they would say, I'm not trying to get you to think like me. I'm trying to get you to be more of you, because we probably need more of you in the world than more of me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And I'm not sure anymore, at least at this point in time, that we elevate that kind of thinking, the ability to sort of self-reflect and is this a good thing? Is this a bad? Make those decisions. We do it on a day-to-day basis in our regular lives, but when it comes to the politics, we seem to lose what works for us in our real life.
That's where, so maybe the answer to this is, because I know we're coming to the end, so maybe the answer is, because part of what happens at the beginning of therapy is you create a space for the potential dialogue. You get a space where everybody has a chance to talk, and there's a chance for that. And we sort of ended by saying, well, we have to we have to put trust that we have given the next generation the tools to be able to do something with this. And one of the things I hear all the time is that, I did not come from, there was no generational wealth. With my father dying, we were poor. So I've had to build some level, and there's not a lot. There's not a lot of generational.
Nice stereo, though.
Yeah, I do have a really nice stereo. How that's going to help my kid, I don't know. But I do think I will give him an economic. He's already got economic potential I never had, and unless I get hit by a truck, I'm going to help him get an education, all that sort of stuff. But so maybe in that same sort of way, we're giving the generation the things that they may need to be able to think about this. That's what we've been able to do, and so we create a space of safety. Continue dialogue, maybe the same sort of dialogue we do here, because that is modeling, if nothing else, a chance to be able to talk about this.
Yeah,
and cross our fingers and say, okay, whatever's going on. In the meantime, though, and maybe there's something to talk about another point. I mean, it is necessary to disagree. And I often don't know what to do with my disagreements because I'm often unsure how much of those are just based on bias. Like, I really have I try to temper my dislike for the current president because I don't think it's helpful. And it doesn't allow me, because, when the person you voted for loses, what you're supposed to do is wish the best for the next administration. Partly because they're going to be guiding your country.
Yes.
That's hard to do because part of you wants, I hope the most horrible things go wrong so I was proven right.
Unfortunately, it hurts you at the same time.
And that's a little like, what is it? Shooting yourself in the foot as a way to hurt.
The cost is so high if that happens.
It's not or whatever. So, maybe the patient, I come from where we do long-term therapy. So maybe this discussion today is the first session. There may need to be more sessions.
Okay, that's that. Now
How's that?
I was hoping that I only had to come in one time, and that's the client. But there seems to be a lot of work to be done here. So. Yeah, you're right. Maybe this is our first session, and I wonder what middle therapy looks like, and I wonder what the final as you terminate therapy.
Well, Freud said that the end of therapy should look like where the therapist tells a joke and they both laugh. So that's how therapy should end. So I like that. People realize this. Freud was really into jokes. He even wrote a book. He even wrote a book on him. Like he was really. You don't think about this guy being like into fun things.
No, you really don't.
It's not.
He seems like a serious guy.
He seemed, but apparently he.
It's about like everything. It sounds like this is kind of underlying current with this conversation all this morning. Is it? We've got a lot of stuff we got to find out about. It seems like we just don't know as much as we think we know, and we need to appreciate other people too in this whole.
Even those people who disagree with me because they're obviously wrong.
They're wrong. But maybe you can help them still. Okay.
That's right.
Tom, it's been a pleasure, sir. Final thoughts on this thing. You brought up this topic. So the idea of treating the United States, America, as a client.
Yes, sounds like you guys had some really great ideas on where we could start. Yeah.
Well, we have a few ideas. We don't know how wonderful those ideas are, but as long as, and I think Dan just said it, as long as we can talk about this and put it on the table, if you can name it and we can talk about it, we kind of move forward on this. I just wish everybody else was come along with that idea and we can talk. So I'm keeping up with this stuff. Today was the first session of America in Therapy.
I hope America is listening, Mike.